Delegates from across the country are, as we speak, gathering inside Parliament House.
April 2008, and a new Labor government was in search of new ideas.
And I think we're going to get a lot of good stuff done.
Gee, what a big crowd.
One of the few ideas that emerged from Kevin Rudd's 2020 summit, and actually stuck, was a proposal to change the way disability was financed in Australia.
NDIS!
In this bill, we see Australia at its very best.
Just as disabilities that arise from catastrophic injuries in, say, a traffic accident have been funded via private insurance pools, the plan was to overhaul the disjointed state-based system of supporting people born with disabilities in a way which ensured they received the support they needed throughout their lives. Beyond creating certainty for them and for ageing parents worried about who would care for their disabled children after they die, the idea was that such a scheme could only boost Australia's productivity and allow hundreds of thousands of family members who would otherwise be carers to join the workforce.
Hi, buddy. When I created my first plan, I walked away from that process with an NDIS plan that had been created by that planner that I met with. And it was a plan that met my needs, which completely transformed my life.
A lot has gone right. I mean, it is supporting over 500,000 Australians, many for the very first time. They're getting critical supports. And so there's a lot that's great about it.
But the cost of the scheme has exploded in recent years, despite attempts to rein it in.
The original price tag was at about $22 billion. It's $30 billion this financial year about to end, and the latest forecast have it rising to about $60 billion by 2030, which is a significant increase.
Well, I think we're having a most unbalanced discussion about what the NDIS is costing.
The man seen as the father of the scheme is former Treasury official and investment banker Bruce Bonyhady, who says the discussion should not just be about the huge benefits it has brought to people with disabilities and their families.
It's had a major impact on employment, and the multiplier effect from NDIS expenditures is very large, and so it's had made a major contribution to the growth in the Australian economy since the scheme began.
We know that for every dollar you invest in the NDIS, it's an economic benefit to every community of $2.25.
But critics and supporters all want to know just what is driving the cost blowout.
There's no doubt that the scheme has become bigger than was originally forecast.
It's possible the original projections were just too low, or that changing diagnostics have changed the prevalence of some conditions.
It was always intended that there would be supports available for people with disability not eligible for the scheme. But today there are almost no supports available for those people. It's become an oasis in the desert.
Hassan Noura, a former executive of the agency that runs the NDIS, says the scheme has been forced to take on a bigger role than originally intended. It is now picking up the slack in aged care, mental health and early childhood development.
Given that the NDIS provides a largely sort of uncapped and relatively generous benefit, whereas other programs provide, partial subsidies and there are big gaps. It's created, I think, a bit of incentive for people to shift from those other social programs towards the NDIS.
There might be cost savings, for example, if allied health professionals in schools supported multiple children instead of them receiving individual NDIS plans. Facing an explosion of demand, an NDIA which is understaffed and lacking expertise is seen to be cutting corners.
What we have heard from people with disabilities and their families loud and clear is that the NDIA, first and foremost, has just simply stopped listening to them. They have received significant cuts to their plans, and they seem to be being made in complete opposition to what their doctors are recommending.
What's more, the role of a crucial cog in the system, local area coordinators, changed. Instead of helping people access mainstream services, these key staff have become deeply involved in designing NDIS plans.
There's been a double negative effect from making local area coordinators de facto planners. First, They have not been resourced adequately and trained properly to do the tasks. But the second effect is that the whole planning process has had a focus on specialist disability supports, which of course in the end are expensive, rather than on community participation. It's a real example of being penny wise and pound foolish.
With costs blowing out, participants have found their plans cut back arbitrarily after a truncated assessment process, often run by those same local area coordinators or LACs.
I had huge health issues, which meant I needed extra supports. I had a 15-minute phone conversation with my LAC, who then passed it on to an urgent planning team, who then passed it on to a delegate planner, who made the plan. So it was all about fitting me into a box that hadn't been there when my first NDIS plan had been created.
Significantly, in a statement to 7:30 tonight, Minister Linda Reynolds said that LACs would be returning to their original role now that the vast majority of participants have entered the scheme. But the cuts that have been made have led many NDIS participants to challenge them in the Administrative Appeals Tribunal. These challenges see people with disabilities pitted against expensive corporate lawyers. The government insists that just over 1% of cases end up in the AAT, but critics say that more often than not, the NDIA is losing.
The AAT process is breaking people, mums of kids with disabilities who are spending night after night for months up at the kitchen table until 2 and 3 in the morning preparing legal documents so that they can go into the AAT the next day and fight for their kids' supports up against 2, 3, 4 top-tier lawyers.
I don't understand how the agency can say it takes an insurance approach, lose so many cases or have to give away so many cases, spend so much money on external lawyers and not think that that's concerning. But the only way they can do that is because, unlike insurers, they don't pay a penalty for getting it wrong, and they ought to.
People involved in the NDIS say there has been a breakdown in trust between the NDIA and the disability community. A lack of clarity from both sides of politics about how they plan to fix obvious problems in the system hasn't helped. The Coalition says it will fully fund the system. Labor has proposed reviews to some aspects of it, but disability advocates say the major parties are underestimating the potency of the issue in this election.
500,000 Australians are on the NDIS. 270,000 Australians rely on the NDIS for a job. If you think of our friends and our families, that's a lot of votes. Is not having the NDIS sustainable? Is having people like me going back to living lives where we cannot work, where we cannot have families, where we cannot contribute to society, is that sustainable? Is that the kind of Australia we want to go back to? Because I think that is too high a cost to pay.
Hi, I'm Lee Sales. Thanks for watching this story. If you'd like to watch more of 7:30's stories, they are on the left of your screen. And tap on the button below to subscribe and get the latest from ABC News.